Guns Gear on target training out here in Oregon. Before we get started, if you enjoy our content, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. All of that fuels the algorithm on YouTube and helps us expand the channel, which helps us as a community of pro-Second Amendment people educate, share, and engage. Today I'd like to talk about two pistol caliber carbines. I received a few comments from subscribers who asked us to talk about two pistol caliber carbines and compare them in terms of what we like, what we don't like, pros and cons of each one. The two carbines that we'll speak about today are the Ruger 9mm PCC pistol caliber carbine, which is a takedown carbine, so the barrel breaks from the buttstock and action of the carbine itself, and the new Smith & Wesson Response carbine in 9mm. Both of these carbines allow the use of magazines that are made by the manufacturer for handguns. In the case of the Ruger PCC, it comes set up to use double-stacked Ruger magazines for their pistols, or a conversion that allows you to run Glock magazines. Since I shoot Glocks frequently, I have swapped that out, so the magazines I run in my Ruger carbine are Glock mags. The Smith & Wesson pistol caliber carbine also comes set up so you can run double-stacked Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm magazines. I also shoot M&Ps quite a bit. So the ability to shoot the same ammunition and use the same magazine as my handgun is appealing to me in a carbine, so a long gun that is easier to shoot and gives me a little bit more distance with the same ammunition. As I've mentioned before in videos that we have done with this carbine, there's a lot to like about it. I'm sort of going to start with, from the buttstock and go through the muzzle. So it has a buttstock that allows you to add these segments on the rear so you can change the length of pull slightly with that. It has a charging handle that can be swapped from the right to the left side depending on what and how you want to run it. So for me, as a dominant right-handed shooter, the ability with this to simply work the bolt to the rear with my non-dominant hand allows me to have my dominant hand on the fire control system, basically, and then work the magazine with the charging handle. I use that same process with the other carbines that I use. So if I'm shooting an AR style carbine, the charging handle, I'll just work with my non-dominant hand typically to do this. I'm not going to leave fire control, come across the top and pull it back, or if I left it on this side, I'd reach up, I'd come off fire control here, and I'd work the bolt. It doesn't matter however you want to do it and set it up. Ruger has given you that option. The trigger in this, the stock trigger, is pretty darn good for Ruger, or at least this setup. It's fairly clean, good break, and allows for pretty good accuracy. And we've safety checked this. There's no ammunition in the firearm. So let's go ahead and give a sense of this here. So it's not a particularly long take up. Okay, and then our reset is relatively short. It's not a particularly heavy trigger, haven't put it on a, haven't measured the weight, but that's a nice trigger out of the box for a stock trigger, and it allows pretty good control and accuracy. As we move further down here, you can see the takedown mechanism is right here. So we would confirm the gun's unloaded. We'd go ahead and actuate this by pulling it forward. Sorry, the bolt needs to be back. We'd pull that forward, and then we'd separate the two parts. So this is a nice way, if you wanted to throw this in a backpack, it's a good way to have a carbine that you can, put in a fairly small container. So I do like that, and I do think that's an attractive feature of this particular setup. Right, just slide it back in. Good to go. Moving forward and considering our sight setup, so we have a pick rail, which you can obviously put an optic on, a scope, if you wanted to. And you also have sights here. And again, it's a fairly short sight radius, but they certainly work. And so if you want to use a red dot, you can do that. The downside of this setup with this red dot is I can't get low enough, the sight, the red dot, can't get low enough to allow me to use my iron sights with the red dot on. Not a deal breaker, but just something to be aware of. We have, nice, durable metal, steel sights. So they're going to be durable. You can hit them, bash them, smack them, and they're not going to fall off or break. They're not plastic. That's nice. We have a threaded muzzle with a standard threading 1/2 by 28, which means if you run suppressors, very easy to put a suppressor in this. You don't need a thread pitch adapter, at least for my suppressors, to run on this because they're set up for 1/2 inch by 28 thread pitch. So, great. From a shooting standpoint, it is very, very soft recoil. Of course, it's a 9mm, but there's no action, there's no buffer tube right up here. So all the recoil is controlled in the gun. And it is, you really don't have the same perception of felt recoil as you do with a AR style carbine that uses a blowback design that's driving the bolt back. You've got the buffer tube spring. So you really have a system here that really mitigates any felt recoil. I know it's a 9mm, I'm just sharing that because new shooters are sensitive to recoil as they're learning how to properly mitigate that. So this type of carbine is a great way to teach newer shooters how to run a semi-automatic carbine in 9mm. So again, advantages are its ability to take it down, its ability to use Glock or Ruger magazines, shoot the same ammunition as your pistol. It has a pick rail. Disadvantages are its sights and the fact that you don't have much modularity up here in terms of the forend to add additional lights, lasers, vertical forends, change out that you have on other AR styles that use a forend that, let's say, that's M-lock or something like that, so you can use that and attach. Accuracy is good, right? I've got some pictures here showing at 25 yards at the bench with some not very high-end quality ammunition, 150 grain Blazer ammunition, Blazer aluminum case ammunition. Good results, reasonable results, able to ring steel, and hit smaller steel silhouettes, 5-6 inch steel silhouettes at 50 yards, able to hit larger silhouettes at 100 yards, but keep in mind the velocity of the bullet and the trajectory of the bullet at that point doesn't always knock over those heavier steel targets, you know, the 25-pound steel targets. Well, it can hit them and sometimes will knock them over. But again, it's just not enough velocity at that point because the velocity has really dropped off at 100 yards. But from a personal protection, home defense standpoint, urban style, right, truck gun type of thing, this works very well and certainly a solid option. Reliability, durability, good accuracy. All right, now we're going to compare and contrast that with the Smith & Wesson 9mm Response carbine. So we have a fire control system very similar to those of you who are familiar with AR style platform rifles or carbines. It's gonna feel like, oh, I know what this is like, and this is pretty natural and normal to me. Start at the buttstock, right? We have a collapsible buttstock that gives us flexibility in terms of where we want to place that buttstock. We have some modularity here in the ability to change out the pistol grip and the way in which it's designed and set up. So I can add back straps that fit my hands better or fit my hands differently. That's always a nice feature. I could also, if I wanted to, put a different pistol grip on here. If I didn't like the angle of this one and I wanted to use something else, I could do that. We have a Picatinny rail that runs all the way from the rear to the front. So typical AR, many ARs that are made today have that same setup. So you can add optics, you can add backup iron sights, you can add, you know, whatever you want. You also have an M-lock forend, allowing you to add, you know, vertical forend like I have here, which I like that with my handicap. That's right where I want it. And I can also use, add additional rails here on these M-lock places around the forend itself. So if I want to add lights, lasers, you know, whatever else, tripods, whatever else, I can do that. In this case, you will note on this side here, I've set this up so I can run a 2-point sling on this particular carbine. So all of these things are you know, really nice. Back to the rear here, again, all the fire controls are very normal. We have our safety, we have our bolt release right there. We have the modularity, and they call this their Flex Mag system. This whole mechanism, this whole part here can be swapped out for Glock to run Glock magazines. So even though it's a Smith & Wesson product, if you primarily are a Glock handgun shooter, you can swap this out to run Glock mags. That's kind of cool. Smith & Wesson says it's going to come out with other magazine wells for their flex mags. I don't know when that is. I don't know whatever other ones they're going to do, but that's at least a selling feature that in the future you may want to check that out and say, oh, well, this is great because now I can change or add to this particular carbine to my collection so that I can shoot and use something a little different. That's cool, right? This is fairly modular. Now, one thing I would note about this is Smith & Wesson, right? They're a manufacturing company. They're thinking about ways to cut cost. This entire upper and almost all of the lower is polymer, plastic. Now people say, oh my God, will the plastic hold up? Well, I've got polymer frame pistols that I've put 50,000 rounds through, so they seem pretty durable. I think it'll be fine. But some people may object to that, and therefore they might want to go with the Ruger. And that Ruger, right, that's pretty much all steel, with the exception of the furniture around that. But everything else is steel. If that's important to you, that's fine. Negatives on this. The gun does not come up with any kind of backup sights, either plastic or iron. I will add them. Why? Because red dots can and do fail, and you want to have a backup sight system. Even if you only have a front sight for close quarters or, you know, stuff out to 15 yards, having that front sight, I use the large rear aperture. of the red dot. Some of you have had training, are very familiar with this. And that rear aperture and that front sight still work, like not out very far. Not, you know, you can still get combat effective hits at 25 yards, but it gets harder and harder. But close in, that large aperture works totally fine, 100%. If you don't believe me, go try this on the range. So I will have a front sight on here. I'll put a rear sight as well. You can run a magnifier, which I did on the range yesterday. I had one that's not set up for the same exact height, but it worked pretty darn good. And so that's an option as well for you. Very good trigger. Clear gun here. So we have a flat face trigger, which is really nice. Short trigger take up. Little, you know, it's not great. There's a little squish here. Break. Reset. Break. Reset. Break. Again, that allows pretty good accuracy. Of the two carbines I was shooting yesterday, and granted this was running a magnifier on the red dot, which helped a lot, so it's not completely fair comparison. I got the best grouping at 25 yards with this setup and this carbine. Same ammunition, same bench, everything else was the same, trying to work my trigger to save. So the magnifier could have been the primary difference there. It could have been the primary difference. At some point, I will put a scope, a magnified optic, on the Ruger and on this carbine, and we'll give those a shot. I was able to ring steel, right, larger silhouettes at 100 yards once I figured out sort of the trajectory of that bullet and where I had to hold, because as you get farther out, we've got a bullet dropping and losing velocity. But I was able to fairly consistently, like probably 80% of the time, as I was figuring out where all that was, to get hits on our steel. And again, these are larger steel, maybe about 12 inches in size. I'll show you a picture here. And both carbines certainly worked on that. At 50 yards, it was kind of all day long, no problem. Just fun, knocking over silhouettes and hanging steel accurately without any issue whatsoever. So that's a look at these two carbines. Both of them have some advantages. If you primarily are an AR shooter and you know that fire control system, this is actually a little easier to run. One final point I want to make, I missed this earlier, but I do want to point out, right? So to lock the bolt to the rear with any AR, I work the charging handle, I push the bottom of the ping pong paddle, bolt is locked. With the Ruger, it's a little different. It's not bad, it's just different. I pull the bolt to the rear. I then have to, come up here, right, underneath at the forward of the trigger and push this little mechanism here to lock the bolt to the rear. Okay. In addition, on the AR style carbines, I can simply dump a mag by pressing the mag release on the right side here. I have to leave fire control to come up to this side, or in this case, I've set it up over here to release the magazine from it. And the reason I swapped both the charging handle and the mag release here was because I wanted to stay on fire control and still be able to drop a mag with my left hand, work the bolt. So that's kind of a downer. The other one is the safety. So if you have a 10-22 or certain shotguns, Remingtons, they have a cross bolt safety. And a cross bolt safety means I am pressing it to the right, in this case, to set the safety. And to release the safety, I'm pressing it forward. I'm pressing it to the left, okay? Which means, again, I have to leave fire control, rather than just a thumb release safety, to reset this. Or I have to take my non-dominant hand, put it close to the trigger, here with my non-dominant hand to engage the safety. So not bad, just different. And I always prefer a thumb safety when you can set it up ambidextrous so you can work with your index finger as well. But that is keeping everything away from the trigger. Think about that. That's important to me. It may be to you as well. I don't want anything going close to the trigger, right? My finger's off. I'm off point. I want the gun safe. Actuating the safety on an AR or a 1911 pistol, right? Thumb, finger straight thumb, every time. That works. So again, not bad, different. Just requires a different training regimen to make sure that you understand that. With any single action firearm, guys, you need and you must engage the safety when you leave point. Point as I'm on target. I can see my target. When I want to leave that position, my finger goes straight and I engage the safety because it's a single action trigger. Meaning what? Meaning when I press the trigger, I'm releasing the hammer or I'm allowing the striker to engage. That means if I have a safety, I must use the safety when the gun is in single action. All right. Well, that's a comparison of two very nice pistol caliber carbines. If you have any questions or comments or pushback to anything that I've shared today, please comment. Please, please, please comment. I'm looking to learn from you. I'm looking to share ideas with you. And our subscribers are just some of the best people out there. Because they're willing to share, they're willing to engage, they're willing to do it respectfully, and they're willing to help me gain more knowledge. First and foremost, I'm curious, and I always want to be a continuous learner. All right, folks, sorry for the long video, but a lot of good information and a lot of things to think about if you're looking to acquire a pistol caliber carbine. And in this case, it's just the Ruger compared to the Smith & Wesson Response carbine. Folks, thanks so much for watching, finally. And as always, stay safe.
All right, folks, out there at 100 yards, shooting a response carbine from a bench. We have a magnifier on a Holosun 403B optic, just a simple red dot. And shooting some 115 grain ammo. I've been asked to talk about, can this carbine reach out as a 9mm pistol caliber carbine? So we've got these silhouettes that are probably, 8 inches, 9 inches across, and probably, 10 inches or so high. And they're just like, you can see them out there. So I'll flip the camera around so you can see this. And then I'll try to get some hits on target, which shouldn't be too